You know, in our day and age, we too stand rather aghast as we watch our nation spiraling away from the principles that once made it great. We see a nation that in many sectors has abandoned those firm principles that this class has embraced, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. We're looking at a nation that has chosen to turn its back on God in many respects. Now, praise God for folks like you. You are the staple. You are the backbone of this country. But we're in a warfare, aren't we? And the Lord has chosen to raise up another preacher in our day and time. His name is Dr. Chuck Baldwin. Now, if there's anything you know about Dr. Chuck Baldwin, he's not silent. Here is a man that is willing to speak his convictions. I've known him over the last number of years. I first met Dr. Chuck Baldwin when a missionary friend of mine was traveling through town from South Africa, and he had a story to tell. I could not get radio stations to take him on, but you know, Dr. Chuck Baldwin said, bring him over. We need to get him on the air. He was a fellow that's fighting in the front lines of missions. He'd been shot at, stabbed, he'd been incarcerated, a man that quite literally is taking the gospel right into the teeth of battle. And Dr. Chuck Baldwin was the one man in Pensacola that put him on the air. Dr. Chuck Baldwin was the founder and is still the pastor of Crossroads Baptist Church, one of the beacons in this community. The Lord has directed in Dr. Chuck Baldwin's life. He's given him the ability to write, to communicate from behind a microphone. For a number of years, he had a live, nationalized program. He more recently was invited to run on the Constitutional Party ticket as vice presidential nominee. And there are some that would say, Dr. Chuck, why do you put all of that effort into the political realm when you're the shepherd of a church, when you're a pastor? But Dr. Baldwin has the insight to understand that if we don't take a stance in the marketplace regarding these issues, these ideas, there could come a day when we wouldn't have the freedom to preach from behind this pulpit and others like it. And so I say kudos to a man who's been willing to step up and to walk his faith, not just to speak it. You know, Dr. Baldwin, we're told that a prophet oftentimes is judged by the size of the stones being hurled at him. If that's the case, we have seated on our platform a true man of God that has chosen to honor God in all that he has done. And it's my distinct delight to welcome and to introduce to you our speaker for the hour, Dr. Chuck Baldwin. Let's all welcome him together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reese, parents and friends of the graduates, and of course the graduates themselves. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak and be a part of this wonderful ceremony today. I truly believe that we are looking at one of the bright lights of America's future.
Amen.
As Dr. Reese just, I think, very ably summarized, our nation has lost its moorings. We have lost our compass, our rudder. We seem to be directionless, not knowing really where we are going. We have been looking for someone to fill in the gap and to provide a spark that would bring this country back to a sense of sanity and of decency. And I believe that the homeschool movement nationally is one of those bright spots that are on the horizon for America's future. In a day and age when it's very difficult to find bright spots, I really personally believe that the homeschool movement is providing a much needed area of success in a day and age when that is just not very much available. It's kind of like, when I think of these graduates, I think of the parents that allowed them to be here. You are the ones that have taken the assignment of teaching these children at home. No easy task. Obviously, our founding fathers in the colonial days did this repeatedly. In fact, it was only later in our country's history that we decided to allow other institutions, especially government institutions, to take this role. We believe the scriptural injunction in both testaments that God gave to the parents the responsibility of teaching and training their young people. And you have accepted that again. And as a result, you have accepted responsibilities and time constraints that many of those in the public schools just have not, for whatever reason, chosen to accept. For example, I hear parents in the public schools talk about how that they want to see year-round schooling, not because that they want their kids necessarily to learn all that much more than they're already learning, but because they don't want the responsibility of having to personally care for them for 2.5 or maybe 3 months during the summer. Because during the summer, the kids are underfoot, meaning they're in the way. They don't know what to do with them. And by the time summertime is over and fall starts, they're all clapping and applauding the fact that school has begun again. Again, not because of scholastic reasons, but now I can get them out of the house, get them back in school, and the schools are more or less babysitters for the boys and girls. You have not chosen to do that. You have chosen to not only nurture your children in the, quote, off hours, but you have chosen to teach your children day by day in a full-time capacity the reading, writing, arithmetic assignments that are charged in most cases to the school environment. So because of that, you are the ones that have allowed these students to be here. You are the ones that have paid the price. You are the ones that are not afraid of the ridicule from the skeptics and those that would seek to impugn what we are doing. And there's always those. Anytime someone seeks to do something good and right, there's always those that are going to be skeptical and critical. And you have chosen to not let that bother you. And I'm sure that some of your friends and neighbors and maybe even fellow church members have said, why in the world are you homeschooling? Don't you know that your children are going to grow up to be social misfits? They're not going to know how to relate to boys and girls their age, and they're not going to know how to function in society. You've heard all these nonsensical things, and you have taken that, I'm sure, graciously, and yet with conviction you've decided to place your children in a homeschool environment. I'm kind of reminded of the story of the elderly lady who was on a public bus and was reading a copy of the Scriptures as she was riding the bus, and there was a young man nearby who was a skeptic, kind of a loudmouth fellow, and he saw this elderly lady reading a copy of the Bible, and so he thought he'd have sport with her. And he looked at her and said in a loud voice, "Is that the Bible you're reading?" And she very proudly said, "Yes, it is, young man." And he said, "Don't tell me you really believe that old, antiquated, outdated book." She said, "I believe every word of it." He said, "Oh, come on, tell me, you believe all those stories in the Bible? For example, that story of Jonah and the whale." He said, "Do you really believe that?" And she said, "Yes, I do believe that." He said, "Well, tell me this, do you understand that?" And she said, "No, I must admit I really don't understand all of it." She said, "But young man, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah to explain it to me." He said, "Well, what if Jonah isn't in heaven?" And she said, "Well, then you can ask him." And I think all of us that have accepted this responsibility of homeschooling our children have been able to look the skeptics and the naysayers in the eye and with boldness and confidence know that what we are doing is right and honorable. And not only that, and I want to say this to the graduates, I really firmly believe that we are living in a day and age, such as Dr. Reese just briefly summarized, in which it's going to take some young champions to change the course of our future. Our institutions, by and large, have failed us and are continuing to fail us. By and large, our churches are failing this generation. By and large, our schools are failing this generation. By and large, our two major political parties are failing this generation. Not to mention our media, our schools of journalism, etc. On every area that you look at, we find failure where we used to find success. As a result, we are languishing as a country. We have not fulfilled what was believed to be our destiny, to honor God and to be a light and a beacon to the world of freedom, and not just of freedom, but of Christianity. This country was formed as a respite for those who had for many years suffered at the hands of brutality and tyranny because of their religious convictions, namely their Christian beliefs. They sought for a place where that Christians could worship God freely without fear of repercussion or persecution. Such was the spirit of the Mayflower, the Speedwell. Such was the spirit of Pastor John Robinson and Governor Bradford and those other Pilgrim Fathers that led the way to this new land and carved out a society that was determined to honor God and that where men and women could be free to worship Him. This country and the Revolutionary War that resulted from that spirit was led by not just the Patrick Henrys of society, but it was also led by the clergymen of that era, the John Lelands and the John Witherspoons and the others who were not afraid to stand up from the pulpits and in the public square and say what was right and what was good for this country. And the result of that was this nation developed and grew as no other nation in the history of mankind has ever known. Today I hear historians in the secular world trying to compare the American Revolution to the French Revolution, which is absolutely nonsensical in its face. There's absolutely no comparison to this nation. There is nowhere you can go to see a similar history than what we have enjoyed in this country. Over the last 50 years or so, we have lost sight of that. We have tried to expunge God from our public and social life to the point that it's hard to find a journalist or a judge that truly understands the meaning of the First Amendment. It is very difficult to find a pastor, a minister of the gospel, who has the slightest inclination as to the relationship between our constitutional form of government and the Word of the living God. This secularistic separation of church and state, this mythical belief that was foisted upon us back in the 60s by these agnostics and atheists who hate God and hate Christ and hate our Bible and, yes, hate the foundations of America, have warped a generation of even Christians from understanding what is our true history and heritage. As a result of that, all the problems that we are facing today are now apparent to us. And as a result of that, many hundreds in the Escambia County, Santa Rosa County area, parents have decided to come together and form a homeschooling network such as we see evidenced here in this graduation ceremony. But I submit to you that nationwide this is taking place. And you see the results of this, not only scholastically, though yes, scholastically. Isn't it interesting that in the spelling bees and the geography bees and all these other bees that people are putting forward these days, so often it is the homeschoolers that are winning these championships. They are proving again and again and again that what they are doing at home is not only good morally and spiritually, it's good scholastically. They are proving their merit and their worth on the scholastic levels. But yes, in I believe the more important realm, the moral and the spiritual realm, the homeschooling movement is shining. Why? Because I would venture to say that these graduates that are seated before you here this morning have a better than rudimentary understanding of some of the issues that I've already enumerated. I would venture to say that most of these graduates here could give you a solvent, sensible answer if we're asked the question, what is the meaning of the First Amendment? They could tell you the relationship of the Constitution and the Word of God. They know more than just a rudimentary, cursory review of our history. They understand a little bit more than what is being taught in the public realm about these fundamental issues that are so critical to our future. They sit before you better educated, better taught, and better prepared for the future than the vast majority of their public school and, in many times, private school counterparts. And I would just say to those of you that are graduating, we need champions. We need men and women in whatever field that you're going to be going into that are willing to stand like the great Americans of yesteryear and be counted for what is right and for what is true. We can no longer accept the status quo. I remember I lived through the turbulent 60s. I remember all of that that happened. Some of you can't remember that. It's just a history to you from a textbook. But I lived it, and Dr. Reese lived it, and some of you lived it during that times when our world was turned upside down. And those were willing to challenge the establishment. Well, I submit to you that we need young people today that are willing to challenge the establishment. Because the establishment in America today is not Christian. It is not moral. It is not even genuine to American history and American heritage. We have a generation of leaders in this country at almost every level that have abandoned, if they ever knew, what was America and the distinctives that made it great. And so I say to you graduates, we need champions. We need young people that are going to go out into whatever realm of society that you are led to go into, whatever your vocation may be, to take what you have learned in your homeschooling environment, to take what God has taught you in your heart about what this country is all about and what our history is all about and what you know to be true and noble and right, and to take that into whatever public square that you may find yourself and be that outspoken, vocal champion for God and for our country that I believe the Lord would have you to believe. I believe you are better prepared for that than anyone else in our society of your age. And so I submit to you as parents that we have done, should I say you have done, an admirable work. You have done a noble work. You have prepared your boys and girls to go out into the world and to take on a society that is literally collapsing from within and to tackle it head on with a conviction and a firmness of heart and soul as to what is right and what is wrong and why, and are now able to go out into the college years or into the vocational years with an assurance and a confidence that I believe even hell itself will not be able to withstand. And so because of that, I think we can proudly and at the same time thankfully send these graduates into the adult world with the confidence of knowing that they are prepared to do whatever it is God has laid on their hearts to do. You know your parents love you, or they would not have spent the time that it took to get you to this point. That they had invested such time and effort should be obvious to you, that they love you, that they care for you. They have invested not only school work and money and materials, but they have invested their heart and their soul into your life and into your future. And I know that you are not going to disappoint them. I know that you are not going to let them down. And I know that you're going to walk out into this world as champions for Christ and champions for freedom that God would have you to be. And we are very, very proud of you. We love you. We thank God for you. And we're going to be praying for you as you enter into your next level of life in the adult world. God bless you, and may God bless our country.